Namaste. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining CoHNA Dialogues. My name is Sudha Jagannathan. I'm a board member of CoHNA, and I have my fellow host here, Suresh Krishnamurthy. He's the executive co-founder. CoHNA, as you know, is Coalition of Hindus of North America. We are a grassroots advocacy organization. We stand up and fight for the rights of Hindus in North America, which is Canada and the United States. So in that vein, we have conducted a lot of sessions trying to educate the community, understand this topic of caste, which is what we are going to be talking about today. And I'm very proud to say that CoHNA was the first one to publish an article in January 2021. This was 6 months after a protagonist got slammed with a caste case in California. And we actually put up a very strong rebuttal of the CRD filings in court. And at that time, we did not know Sundar or the other defendant. We did not know the details of the case itself, but we felt that CRD had done a very bad job of representing the facts about Hindus and Hinduism and slamming the entire Hindu community on the basis of one alleged case. So you know that the case has fallen apart. And our guest here today, Sundar Iyer, was vindicated with the state and the California Civil Rights Department ignominiously withdrawing the case in April of this year. So today's conversation is not going to be about the specifics of the case, the legalities of what's going on and continuing to happen. It's about the human impact. How was Sundar as a human being affected by this act, egregious act of a state agency? And what advice does he have to the community to protect itself, right? We are all kind of looking at Sundar and what happened and asking a question, could I be in the situation and what would I do? So with that, I'm going to pass the baton on to Suresh to kick off the conversation. And welcome, Sundar. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Of course. Yeah.
Thank you, Sudhaji. Thanks for the introduction. I'd like to I'd like to share a screen. We would like to dedicate this particular conversation that we are having with Sundar to a person who has been. Can everybody see my shared screen?
Yeah.
We'd like to dedicate this to Shri Milind Makwana. Milindji was a staunch warrior for the cause of Sanatana Dharma. He never allowed the tags that were put on him. He was a Dalit, but he never allowed that tag to somehow define him. He refused to be defined by that particular moniker. He was a relentless warrior for the cause of Hindu Dharma. And the very last act he did, literally the last conversation he had, was when he stood up in front of a city council and made a passionate argument as to why they should not be focusing on caste and why the various parties that quote unquote claim to speak for him do not speak for him. So we would really like to dedicate this to the memory of Shri Milind Makwana. Wherever he is right now, I know he's smiling down on us, egging us on, and asking us to continue this fight. Okay, so as Sudhaji pointed out, we were kind of early to the party, right? We wrote back in January of 2021. We said what concerns us is the use of this one case of alleged workplace discrimination, and we also found it troubling that the CDFEH, that's what CRD was called at the time, is attempting to define Hinduism, a major global religion. And what we said at that point was, we saw back in 2021, we saw what was going to happen. The consequences are far-reaching, with the potential to single out and bring disrepute to an entirely new and little understood group of immigrants. Harks back to darker days in California history, when the state was active in misrepresenting and suppressing the rights of communities. Now, it turns out 3 years later, Sundar Iyer has been vindicated, that all the case has been dropped, The case against him has been dropped. And the way I would like to set this conversation up is, this is a search for truth. This whole conversation is about searching for truth. And while there has been a lot of ink spilled about the case all over the world, and we all know what kind of messaging went on, we would like to kind of set the record straight. So while we don't want to get into the details of the legalities, the way I'm going to set this up is, there are some egregious statements that are made about Sundar and Ramana Kompella personally in the complaint. And what I would like to do is just, Sundar, if you don't mind, I'll start off by setting up some of these quotes and simple yes or no answer, and then I'll turn it over to you for your thoughts on what the process was like, what it felt like, right? So with that said, let me switch to... Sure, go ahead.
Suresh, before you start, I just wanted to first say thank you for having me on. I also wanted to give a shout out to CoHNA in general. You were all amongst one of the first organizations to talk about the case. And independent of the facts of the case, I'm actually very happy that you did not take a position on the facts of the case. To me, one of the most useful things, and both CoHNA as well as HAF did, was to show neutrality where neutrality was demanded, and to show oomph where oomph was demanded, right? Because their claims against Hindus, Hinduism, and the constitutional things that they did are wrong, and you folks pointed that out very clearly, and the consequences that it will get to. So I'm very thankful for that and for what you did. So
thank you. We appreciate that. So let's start off with this. I mean, this is from the introduction of the case that was filed by CDFEH, and there they make the statement: India's centuries-old caste system as a strict Hindu social and religious hierarchy. Now, there's been a lot of press about how this does not target Hindus, it does not target Indians, it is widespread, it is this, that, and the other thing. But from what I'm seeing here, this is very clearly associating the entire caste system as India and Hindu. So, Sundar, would you agree that that is a characterization that CRD has followed all along?
I mean, yeah, the short answer is yes. You can see it in their own definition of caste as a strict Hindu social and religious hierarchy. To say the least, there are a lot more references of the CRD with Hinduism. They not just define the term, they assign caste to individuals. I'll go into details later. They compared the castes of different individuals. They speculated on what is a caste hierarchy. They brought in declarations of folks who were not Hindu to talk about Hinduism. They put in book chapters that compared Hinduism to Buddhism, Hinduism to Jainism, and Hinduism to Sikhism, all in a disfavorable manner. What the CRD has done is an abject violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution.
So the first myth that we want to point out is somehow this is not targeting Hindus and Indians. And the truth of the matter is, clearly it is targeting Hindus and Indians. So here's a second piece that comes up, which is, it says, and here Doe worked with a team of entirely Indian employees. Team members grew up in India and immigrated as adults. Except for Doe, the entire team are also from the high caste in India. This is specifically referring to your team, is it not?
That is correct. Yeah, and just to peel that, the CRD's, I wouldn't even say myth, the CRD's deliberate false claims versus the reality. We gave the CRD proof. We, in fact, gave them the whole employee consultant, the whole list they have. My team consisted of people from across the world. We had white Americans, we had Hispanic Americans, we had Asian Americans, of course, we had South Asians, we had European Americans, we had the whole gamut. So that statement is just entirely false. Okay. The second statement, which is the fact that they say that the whole team is from the high caste. First of all, I do not even know how they even make that statement for multiple reasons. It would be almost impossible for them to know the caste identity of different people. Second, many of them are not even Indian, so they know very well they can't even assign the caste. Third, and what is even more egregious, is they knew that the person who got all of the other leadership positions in my group, the person who was first offered or accepted those positions, is also a Dalit. Just from that fact alone, and a number of the other facts that were given them, those statements that they've identified in yellow are not just false, they're a reckless indifference to the truth at best.
Okay. So that's myth number 2 that is busted. So here is myth number 3. At least in our view, it's a myth number 3. Because both knew Doe is Dalit, they had certain expectations for him at Cisco. He was expected to accept a caste hierarchy within the workplace where he held the lowest status within the team, and as a result received less pay, fewer opportunities, etc., etc., etc. They also expected him to endure a hostile work environment. Is this true?
So there's a lot to peel, and so let me go through different parts. First of all, me knowing he's a Dalit and had expectations for him. Look, John Doe was my classmate. The fact that John Doe was not on the main list was something that was, of course, known to me. That doesn't mean I knew his exact caste by any means. But that said, the more important thing here is, what were my expectations of him? Well, first of all, I hired John Doe. If I was bigoted against Dalits, allegedly knowing his caste, I would have had no reason to hire him. Silicon Valley has hundreds of thousands of engineers to hire from. So that right off the bat, my expectation of him, or having a bigoted expectation of him, is wrong. But to peel that expectation word for a minute, here's what they're trying to push through. What they were trying to say, and we saw this in conversations, is that because he was a Dalit, I expected him to work in a certain way in potentially a subservient manner. Well, let's break that falsification right off the bat. When John Doe came, first of all, I invited him. I solicited him. I was his hiring manager. What did I do when he came? I gave him millions of dollars in compensation. How was I able to do that? Well, I gave away 100% of my CEO equity in the startup that I founded, that I co-founded with a year of my sweat and blood. That allowed me to treat him like a king, and not just him, but every employee of mine was treated in the same way, as well as I could to make them successful. Let's get to the next part. Doe was expected to accept a caste hierarchy within the workplace, where he held the lowest status. Let's just take that sentence now. What's the caste hierarchy in my team? My team was completely flat. In my whole tenure at Cisco, remember this was a Cisco startup, I was the CEO and everyone directly reported to me. What hierarchy are they talking about, right? I would expect the CRD to clarify the nature of that lie. Is it an organizational hierarchy? By definition, that could not be the case. They all reported flat into me. Well, perhaps it's a different form of hierarchy. And maybe they say, well, the Brahmins were at the top and the Dalits were at the bottom. That claim is also untrue. In my group, in all the 3 top leadership positions, I either offered or the position was accepted by another senior Dalit candidate. In fact, if you had to talk about a hierarchy in my group, you would argue, inarguably, factually, that the hierarchy, if one existed, would be the other way around. A Dalit was given every top position in my group. In fact, independent of, when I say given positions, these are, when you give somebody a position or a title, that's independent of the promotion, right? Promotion is a grade level bump. Let's get to promotions too. The only person that I have ever managed to promote in my entire Cisco startup tenure is the other senior Dalit colleague, right? So that statement of expected to accept a caste hierarchy is just, again, a reckless indifference to the truth.
Yeah.
Let's get to the next part that you put in.
Expecting him to endure a hostile work environment.
Right, yeah, I'm coming to that. So one other quick thing you have is Doe held the lowest status in the team. That you can see is by definition wrong, because Doe had the joint highest grade in my group. This is public record. He had the grade of principal engineer. And so he had the joint highest grade, so there's no way he can have the lowest status in the team. I actually want to spend 1 more minute on the lowest status, and thank you for doing this so methodically. Let's peel this word lowest status, because it's easy to throw out some bullshit, right? When John Doe came to Cisco and I hired him, between September 2015, within the first quarter of his hiring, I showered him with leadership opportunities, right? I gave him every possible new lead position that, I had open and say, hey, you want to take this, let's move on, let's run with it. If you look at the actual internal records, John Doe, within about 3 months, would have had more lead positions than any other employee in my group. That's how well I treated him. And that's how well I would treat anybody. Why did John Doe not succeed? The CRD has tons of records of why, despite he being given leadership positions, he did not get to the party. He did not perform. What the reasons were, we'll come back to it later, but I'll stay on point here. Your next sentence is he received less pay. Well, let's look at the reckless indifference to the truth on this sentence. John Doe's compensation is several millions of dollars. That's several millions of dollars more than me, because I took zero in equity in my own startup. John Doe also has more compensation than Ramana Kompella. John Doe has more compensation than the other manager that they have not named. John Doe has more compensation than almost all of the folks in my startup. That's how well I treated the man. And what does less pay mean? It means that they claim that John Doe was not given a few something $1,000 in salary increment in October 2016. That's the one data point that they want to focus on to bring this less pay allegation.
So clearly, sorry, Sundar, but yeah. Clearly this whole notion of a hostile work environment is clearly fabricated, right? I mean, it is essentially trying to make a case when there isn't a case. Now, one of the more interesting phenomena.
Suresh.
Yeah.
Suresh, I have a quick question. Sundar, I just wanted to make sure everybody understands. You hired your people because they were talented people, right? You have a startup, and that's what happens in every company, right? You hired people from your network, and they had to have a proven record of performance. And so the fact that John Doe was hired was not because he was a buddy from IIT or wherever it was. You had an understanding of how he could perform in the company. And that same goes for all of the other 40, 50 people you hire, right? So it's regardless of his background and the fact that you knew each other. He had talent, you needed somebody with talent in your company. So that leads me to a question. How about managers now? Let's say the caste becomes a law or not in California. But what are managers to do? What would you advise to managers when an Indian applies for a job and maybe they are self-declaring as Dalit? And let's say the person is supremely talented, the company hires that person. But the person is only marginally talented compared to other candidates. What's a manager to do? Is a company supposed to be bullied by California's laws and policies? I think if you could shed a light on that.
Yeah, I mean, so you asked actually a much broader question, and let me answer it this way. The biggest problem we have in the state of California today is at a very foundational level. It's not so much the caste issue, the Indian issue, the Hindu issue or stuff. It's much broader. It is the fact that the Civil Rights Department in the state of California, which is supposed to be the person who litigates workplace laws, does not speak the truth. And at that point, everything is fair game. We're all screwed, pardon my terminology, if you have a government agency that does not speak the truth. That's the problem, which is a huge one. And what that means, and now to come to your specific question, what that means is there is almost nothing you can do. Remember that this was all happening before an SB 403 like law was even passed, because of course, caste is protected. There have been caste claims filed in the past. They're very rare, but they've been filed in US courts. There is nothing you can do. If I am sued for Dalit discrimination for having given every position to a Dalit, I do not know what happens to the common man tomorrow. Or the common woman tomorrow. I do not know what happens to a manager who, perhaps, did not give a position to a Dalit, but gave it to some other person. Let's, give him a different caste, or, maybe he gave it to a German, right? Then what happens? They don't even have the option of showing, hey, by the way, the other person who got the position was also someone who identified as a Dalit. So my point is, I'll come back to your question a bit later, Sudha, on a more detailed one. But my fundamental point was, without the truth, there's nothing you can do. Yeah.
So that leads into my next piece. You're talking about abuse of authority by a government department. We also have similar, what I would call abuse of authority by academia. So one of the things that happened during this case, during the Cisco case, there were a lot of amicus briefs filed by a whole bunch of people, some by Thenmozhi, Soundarajan, but one in particular caught my attention. This was presented by Professor Simon, Lawrence Simon, from Brandeis University. Now, he was the prime mover behind adding caste protections in Brandeis's policy back in like 2016, 2017. So he submitted an amicus brief in support of this, because just to give a little bit of background, one of the questions that has been raised in the chat today, as well as in the past, is why do we keep calling him John Doe? Why not refer to him by his own name? The answer is John Doe formally petitioned the court for the right to be anonymous in this case. That has not yet been adjudicated. That has not yet been decided. Now, even though the case is dropped, the case is still pending against Cisco, so there's a legal implication. So in support of John Doe wanting to be anonymous, several people submitted amicus briefs, and one of them was submitted by Lawrence Simon. So Professor Simon, and here is what he said in his submission. He says, casteism manifests in much the same way. It is a reaction to Dalits who used to be called untouchables coming into the corporate workforce as trained engineers in the same corporate cafeterias or having the audacity to use the same toilets. So Sundar, my blunt question to you is this. You worked at Cisco for a long time. I worked in corporate America for almost 40 years now. Sudha has worked in corporate America for many, many years. Have we ever seen a situation where somebody was told not to eat in a corporate cafeteria or not to use a corporate bathroom?
I mean, the claim here is also so nonsensical in the sense that, the short answer to your question is obviously no. None of us have seen that. None of us would tolerate such behavior. But I actually want to go one step further, since we're talking about the present case, and he wrote a declaration for this particular case. John Doe is a person I've known for 25 years. We have been to each other's homes. We've eaten food. We've shared food of the same plate. For God's sake, we've gone to parties together. We've done Diwali events together. He's been to my home on my birthday. We've drank and sang together, right? That is the level of, the person who then you add a claim like this in a declaration. I mean, I have no words. That's all I can say.
This caught my attention because I was like, wait a minute, why are they making such a statement? Because I mean, like you, I also went to IIT for 5 years, and in those 5 years, nobody knew what anybody's caste was, and everybody ate off the same plate. We all ate in common hostels and common tables, common this, common that. And so I'm looking at this thing going, so I want to round this out by playing a very short video, right? A 1-minute video of a person that we are all probably really familiar with, just to show how this whole theme has been influenced by outsiders. And by outsiders, I mean academics like Professor Simon, activists like Thenmozhi Soundarajan, other academics that have come from Harvard and so on and so forth. So I'm going to play this video, okay?
So what happens is that if there is an HR investigation, related to caste, someone who's experienced caste harm or hostility or discrimination can go to HR and say, I've experienced something that I believe has violated my rights to access this workplace safely. When they go to HR, then HR will understand that this person is identifying as a caste oppressed person. And then all of their HR investigations are going to be about what was in the mindset of the harm doer during the times of these actions. And, I think that, as we saw with the John Doe allegations in the Cisco litigation, you didn't have to be an expert in caste to know that he was experiencing a hostile workplace. And that's really all that it is. It's not rocket science. It's not a mystery. The only person that adding caste as a protected category hurts is someone who is a discriminator.
Okay, she's talking about you, right? You are the discriminator, the harm doer, and HR is supposed to look into what's in your mind. Is that so? How does that make you feel as a human being, as a person who has this big target painted on his back and whose mind is supposed to be read, and the only person who's opposed to this is the discriminator, the harm doer. And because John Doe said he was feeling this way, clearly he was in an environment that caused him harm. So talk to us about how does it make you feel?
I mean, first of all, off the bat, for the great Miss Thenmozhi Soundarajan, hats off to you to use allegations as facts. I mean, thank you very much for your service. Second of all, I think the bigger problem here is the CRD. And I just want to dial in on this hostile work environment claim. There's so much here in John Doe's what are essentially conclusory allegations, right? And that's what Cisco also says in their demo. I just want to focus on that for a minute. Cisco says this repeatedly, which is when John Doe feels harassed, that's not a claim. When John Doe says he was disparaged, that's not a claim. When John Doe says it's a hostile work environment, that's not a claim. Those are conclusory allegations. A claim is something which is specific, where something was done to you specifically by someone, date, location, time, witness, facts. None of these are even meaningful in a court of law when you make conclusory allegations, right? So I just wanted to put that off the bat. And, I've today decided to speak freely, right? I want to focus on one aspect of his claim. John Doe claims he was isolated, right? And I'm pretty sure Kevin Kish, the director of the CRD, is going to be listening to this because they know all of these facts. So let me take one aspect of his hostile work environment claim, that John Doe was isolated. Well, let's take that claim into perspective because the CRD wants to hide all of these facts. John Doe doesn't want to work directly under me. Great. John Doe doesn't want to work under Ramana Kompella when he was offered. He will not work under him. We had a second co-head of engineering, which is referred to in the complaint. He's not named. We asked John Doe, would you like to work under him? No. Next, I write to John Doe saying, which group would you like to work for? Pick any group, and we're happy to make that happen. John Doe does not respond to that. I asked John Doe, do you want to discuss your career? John Doe refuses, scoffs at it. Then I asked John Doe, is there any other senior engineer you want to work with in a group so that you don't feel isolated? John Doe scoffs at that offer. I work with my technical program manager to have her invite him to meetings to make things work. He brushes her off. Then I work with HR. I work with my team. And I finally tell John Doe, look, I'm moving on because I decided to distance myself from John Doe fairly quickly, right, given his shenanigans. And Ramana put a plan together in place as I would move on, and he's trying to build an org. And again, we asked him any group for him to work for, he will not. And so then Ramana, working with me, assigned him a new manager, right? A new manager that John Doe has never interacted with much in a day-to-day, right? So because others are worried about his lack of performance and what he's doing. So as we do this, he refuses to work under the new manager also. I have done every possible thing to make the man comfortable. but he continues to file a claim of isolation with Cisco. These are all facts that Mr. Cavendish and the CRD knows. Why are these facts that they know? Because they have written records of these. These are written emails from me to John Doe. These are written overtures. These are written offers, hey, work with this manager or work with this team, that John Doe refuses. They have all of these records, but they still go ahead and make an isolation claim. You may call that fabrication. There's a better word for it. It's not even gross negligence. There's an even better word. It's a reckless indifference to the truth. I actually believe it's even worse, because I actually believe, and I've evidence, that what the CRD has done is perjury and subornation of perjury. But anyway, I just want to leave you with that isolation claim that the CRD wants to tell the whole world about how an innocent Dalit was isolated by alleged upper caste managers. So that's how hostile the work environment was, where we did everything possible, parried his behavior, his hostile nature to us, his emails that many times were hostile not just to me, to Ramana and other managers. And we took all of that brunt while still getting sued by the great CRD. So will Mr. Cavendish tell the governor the truth? I do not know.
So here is a chronology, right? The lawsuit was filed in October of 2020, right? In March of 2021, it gets kicked to the appellate courts for some clarification on a bunch of things. And between March 2021 and October of 2022, it's basically sitting in appellate court. Nothing is happening in the state in the state court. But during this entire time, your case is front and center for all kinds of presentations. We had the famous, the Dismantling Global Hinduduphobia conference, where your photograph and Ramana's photograph were pasted on the screen for thousands of people to see, with the commentary that you guys, because of your last names, Iyers, Trivedis, Kompellas, you are naturally castes. You are naturally oppressors. You are naturally this. So you now go 2.5 years of watching your name be thrown around in the media as this monster. What kind of effect does it have on you? Does it have on your family? How does it affect your, I mean, I have to believe that this has got to be one of the toughest things to wake up to every morning with this big knife hanging over your head, not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. Talk us through this, because I mean, many of us have been managers in corporate America, but we have not gone through anything similar to this, right? Nothing like this. So in a sense, you have a unique perspective. So share with us this perspective so people who are watching this can understand what it might be like for them should it happen to them.
Yeah. Well, I'll be very blunt. First of all, growing up in India was good, right? You toughen up to a number of things. I grew up in Bombay. You play with the street kids in Bombay. You learn a lot. My school actually had 60%, I believe, were refugee kids from Pakistan, one generation out. So you learned a lot, you toughened a lot, and I've always been proud of being, a person who could take a lot of crap, right? Because that makes you grow strong as a leader. But nothing prepares you for the crap that the CRD, their activists who pretend that they care about the Dalits, the academics, and of course the mainstream media, the way they work together to what they put me through. I mean, I've woken up at probably 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. on 4 out of 7 days at least in the 2020 to 2021 timeframe. It took me over 15 months just to get over the shock phase internally, right? You're of course trying to survive, and you're trying to do things with your life, and you have to, right? You have to hold on to some level of strength. But remember this is a state agency coming after you. You know that almost everything they have thrown out there is a direct fabrication and a lie. You're being told by your defense lawyers not to speak anything, right? Because you're a defendant in the case, till you're out at least. The other side continues to lob whatever they want. The Dalit activists, and I'm sorry, I should not call them Dalit activists. These are activists who pretend they care about Dalits. go with the allegations and throw it across the universe, right? No activist who cares about Dalit, I believe no one who cares about anybody is truly empathetic or caring till they wait for the truth. But these activists will not. So they do all of this stuff. And I got to tell you this, there are moments even in my toughest interior selves when you wonder whether you should end it all, right? I mean, it's a thought that goes into your mind many a time. Now, here is what I realized. I am built of a very strong internal stock, but this is not about me. The reason I'm speaking out, the reason I'm going to fight this, the reason I'm dedicating my current phase of my life to this, is the CRD's behavior, along with their activists, their mainstream media, their opinion piece writers, and the great academics. This sort of script will play out with someone else, and you will look at the first suicide of a Californian manager. And I want to prevent that. And I say this not with any hot-headedness. I don't say this with an immense passion or, this, voice of passion. I say this from a cold, rational analysis of the situation. What these folks are doing will end in someone ending it all. And I do not want that to happen. And that's why I'm here fighting this fight.
Yeah, that is a tragedy. That is a tragedy that we all want to prevent in any circumstance. We never want to put that kind of pressure, and that pressure gets multiplied 1,000 times when you know you are innocent, right? And but you have no means of proving it. I mean, you happen to have written an article 20 years ago saying that you don't believe in the caste system. You happen to have Dalits on your team to whom you have given major positions. You happen to have equity that you gave up to these folks. I was just thinking, I was just hypothetically thinking, if somebody came to me in my corporate career and they said, okay, this is it, you have discriminated against a Dalit, I honestly wouldn't even know where to begin. Because yeah, you have your life and you have your standards. Now, clearly, I'm an active follower of Hinduism. I practice it. I do puja every other day. I mean, you look at me and you know that I follow my religion, and that's my personal choice. With that personal choice, I don't see what my defense can be under these kind of circumstances. So one of the things I want to share with you at this point is, I mean, we saw this coming, and when the lawsuit was withdrawn, right, in early 2023, we wrote an article, we wrote several articles. CoHNA was front and center calling this out. And I want to put some language from those articles up in front here. So the complaint turned into a lawsuit. Upon information and belief, claims the lawsuit, Iyer is a Brahmin. Not a word of testimony, but he's been convicted in public opinion as the very essence of Brahminical dominance, despite his public disavowal of caste, right? This has now become the reason for all these at Cal State University system, UC Davis, etc., etc., etc. Now, here is a challenge for people who might be watching this, who might be wondering, how does it affect me? Here's a challenge. Data shows, and you and I, we have talked about this, data is paramount here. Data shows that over 80% of Hindu Americans who have immigrated self-identified as quote unquote general category. Okay. We are also tagged as upper caste. So there is a better than 4 in 5 odds that you are also labeled as a dominant class, no matter who you are, right? If you deny it, you will be given the designation because based on your last name. Because that's the only reason I can think of why they would tag Sundar Iyer, who has written in the past that he doesn't believe in the caste system, as a Brahmin, because his last name happens to be Iyer, right? But here is the deal. Vindication that came in March, 3 years after, 2.5 years after all the headlines, after all the vilification, it may have come too late, because I don't see how or what the CRD and the state of California will or can do to restore the reputation that you possessed. I don't see how they can ever take away the footnote that will always be associated with your resume, that is, he was sued for caste discrimination. And that's the part that really, really gets to me, which is how does an agency, because we are talking about truth here, how does an agency restore the name of a person that it intentionally and malignantly besmirched for 2.5 years? Who will be the next Sundar Iyer? Who will CRD claim as the next upper caste Brahmin upon information and belief? Will it be me? Will it be Sudhaji, who after a long number of years had to identify herself as a Bahujan, right? But there's nothing that stops a CRD or equivalent from looking at Sudhaji and saying, oh, you're a Brahmin, you're upper caste, right? So the challenge for us is, in trying to get our heads around this, is what next? Where do we go from here? What do we have to do as a community, right? Irrespective of our individual beliefs about Hinduism, caste system, whether you believe, whether you don't believe. I mean, look at this, the three of us, one who's an avowed non-religious person, and two others who are clearly practicing their religion. We are all on the same side saying this is wrong, right? And CoHNA was not, we are not looking at Sundar going, oh my God, Sundar is not he said he's not a believer, so let's leave him alone. Let's forget about him. No, we recognize what is being done to him is unfair, no matter what his beliefs are. This is not about whether or not you are a practicing Hindu or not a practicing Hindu. This is about targeting you for your last name based on some statistics that have been brought up.
Yeah, Suresh, I just wanted to point out that what we have to understand is this is not about particularly about Sundar or Suresh or me or anyone else. It's really about Sundar not being atheist enough, right? For somebody. It's about Sudha not being Bahujan enough for somebody. It's about Suresh not being Hindu enough for somebody, right? So we need to know that while this case and Sundar's story is very, very critical to understand that here was one company that had the highest diversity across the Hindu spectrum. He was attacked, right? So in the companies that you work in, the companies and departments that you work in, you may not know anyone's identity, but you could be the next person who that CRD can come after. You could be the next one that HR comes after. You are already the next one who is now challenged by your non-Indian manager. What's your caste? Thinking it's very normal question. So I think with all of that, I would ask everybody to listen to all of the interviews that Sundar has already given, understand the case, look at CoHNA.org, decolonize section, which is a treasure trove of tons of information that we have curated, we have put together, etc. If you don't know what the scenarios out there, remember there are activists there who do not want us to succeed on merit.
Yeah.
This is an attack on merit. It's an attack on truth.
On that, right? So here is a twist on that whole issue. So far, every single accusation of caste discrimination, because one of the things that Equality Labs makes a big deal of after this lawsuit was filed, several hundreds of people came forward and said they too have been discriminated. The funny thing is, everybody is anonymous. Everybody is anonymous. And yet at the same time, they're saying somehow magically, as soon as this caste law is passed, they'll all come forward. Well, guess what? Brandeis University has had this on their books for 6 years. In those 6 years, there's not been a single case. Cal State University system has had this for about 1.5 years now. Not a single case. So the point we want to make, we want to leave people with to ponder over is, remember that this can also come from entirely anonymous sources who will get every protection from the legal system in keeping their identity secret on the thesis that somehow revealing their identity puts them at risk. This is a classic self-defined catch-22. I can't divulge my identity because I am in danger of being assaulted, and I am in danger of being assaulted because I can't disclose my identity. This is a classic self-referential thing. So my question for Sundar, I mean, I know we are coming up on in the last few minutes, but my question for Sundar is this. I mean, how did your support system work? What was your support system like? I mean, outside of organizations like CoHNA, who we were publicly supporting you, you must have had, I don't know, family. Did you run into situations where even close family members or family members who you thought close were kind of looking at you at an angle going, really? Would it be possible? Is it possible that you were casted? I mean, was there that subtle look that you recognized over the 2 years? I mean, or were you lucky enough to have a support system that had the faith in you that, the facts are on your side?
Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of close family and friends, I mean, I had a very strong support system. People know. I mean, people know me for more than 20 plus years. And of course, my closest friends, including, people who know me professionally, in fact, wrote to me and said, we realize this is bullshit, right? And of course, then Cisco put out a blog, which clearly said, they did several investigations. And of course, they couldn't find anything. But more importantly, if you look at the complaint itself, there are no specifics, right? I mean, when you have a complaint that's so cooked up, the complaint itself shows you the amount of cooking up that's going on. There are internal contradictions within the complaint, and there are no witnesses. And his claims are essentially conclusory allegations. So anyway, short answer is, of course, in terms of close friends and family, things were good. But the damage done when you have friends in the extended network, right? Or people who don't know you, or your professional damage. I definitely had a fair bit of professional damage. In fact, even things I heard, there was a company that was, I think they were looking to give me an advisory position. And then, I actually know a lot more details about, what the great John Doe did in that scenario. But I'm going to stay away from that. But let me come back to your other point here, right? Which is, the personal journey and where does this put us, right? I want to keep coming back to this, which is the CRD, right? And also where we are today. When you have parties that treat allegations as facts, especially the Thenmozhis of the world, the AKSCs of the world, right? These organizations, I think it's Mr. Karthikeyan of the organization.
Yeah.
The amount of articles they write, they go on Indian TV channels, they go on Twitter, they keep writing crap. And I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Karthikeyan. Stop the hate, dude. We are not here to hate you. We're here to love every person who is amazing. You spend the last 3 years of your life shitting on the one manager who gave every position to a Dalit, a position of a person who self-identified as a Dalit. Please wait for data, facts, and evidence. But if you do not want to, and you want to push your narrative, go right ahead and build the hate. What you are doing is not productive to the beauty of improving relationships between people. What you folks have done is made the environment toxic. Without truth, there is nothing to be written. There's another thing I want to point out. I want to give a great thank you to New York Times, the LA Times, Bloomberg, and all of you fantastic mainstream media reporters. You will not report the truth. And what you do is morally wrong and unethical. What you do, even though you've been given access to court records and copious amounts of data, is you want to pour the kerosene on the Indian population, and you do not want to tell them the truth. I also want to say one more thing. Mr. Kevin Kish, 2 years back, a young lady, I believe, had written a change.org resolution, writing to you to beseech caste to be added. To that young lady, you replied to have her go and talk to the California legislatures. It is that same young lady that you did not tell her the truth. You did not tell her the truth, and she used the Cisco case and got inflamed by it. I believe her name is Arti Ramaswamy or something. But you inflamed somebody without telling her the truth, that the one group in Silicon Valley where every position was given to a Dalit, you used that, you hid that critical evidence to push your narrative. Thank you, Mr. Kevin Kish. Go ahead, Suresh.
So yeah, we're coming up on 2 o'clock. So there are a couple of questions that are out on the Q&A session, and we're going to answer some of these questions that people have asked. One question is: so is this a case of Mandal Commission reservations exported to the U.S. and the Hinduduphobia forces of Audrey Trushky taking it over from there? I don't know if you want to conflate what is happening in India with what is happening in the United States. I think they are two different countries, two different environments, two different setups. I think people who are immigrated here generally have immigrated here because they want to either they're looking for opportunities or they are looking to leave behind what they had in India, or both, or some combination thereof. So I don't necessarily. By the way, the U.S. courts have in no uncertain terms, made it extremely clear that the quota system that we follow, that is being followed in India, will never be legal here. That has been very clearly said by the Supreme Court on several occasions. So that quota thing simply cannot work. So I don't think it's necessary to compare the two. I think the reasons for this kind of targeting is probably much more mundane. In politics, there is a rule: follow the money. And in this case, if we follow the money, I think this is a conflation of creating a problem in order to be the person to solve it. I think that's what is going on here, where organizations that are ostensibly speaking for Dalits are actually speaking for themselves. So we'll delve more into it. But no, we don't think we can compare what's happening in India with what's happening in here. Can you not sue the state of California? It's, again, lawsuits are the privilege of individuals. With pending lawsuits, there's always issues. I know that, Sundar, you have joined in a new lawsuit against the state of California. I don't want to get into that again because it's pending litigation. But yes, the answer is, can you sue the state of California? Yes, and there are lawsuits that are both in progress and in process as well. Right? There's a question for Sudhaji, which is, we know that caste is targeting Hindus of Bharat and other nations wherever they are from. So doesn't adding a protected characteristics to diversity and inclusion impact the already protected characteristics like race, religion, nationality? I shouldn't be targeted because of my race, religion, nationality, but now I would be targeted. So Sudhaji, you have spoken in the past about how you are basically caste indifferent, but somehow all this conversation has kind of forced you to bring that out to the fore. Can you speak to us for a few minutes on what it has done to you?
Yeah. So I've lived in the US for 40 years, raised my kids here. Honestly, my kids don't know their caste. I did not know my caste. I went and asked my mother, let me tell you, asked my mother my caste, and maybe she didn't understand the terminology. She said, you have no caste, you have a jati. Of course, everybody in India has a jati or a tribe or a community. I'm just saying I'm not denying anyone else's experience anywhere. I'm just saying my own experience has been caste. Was never in my life in the US, in my networks, etc. So just on the point of the protected categories, I want to say, even the sponsor, Senator Wahab, has in every talk she has given said, it is not necessary to have caste because it's already protected under national origin and ancestry, which are protected categories under the civil rights laws. But she wants to add it for clarification. That is where the problem is. Now, instead of dissolving caste consciousness everywhere, she's really reinforcing caste into everybody else's mind. And I'll point out something there, because this is the reason why managers, non-Indian managers, feel empowered to ask Indian or Hindu employees, what's your caste? They think it's normal. And so we just want to be able to stand up and push back on that, because that's a question not asked of an Iranian or a German or another employee, only of an Indian. And if you say, why are you asking me? They'll say, that's because Hindus have caste. You have to push that back. So this is why education is very important, and understand that you do not, the Cisco caste case was not on the basis of a caste protected category, which it did not exist. It was on the basis of current protected categories. So the fact that we are having to stand up and claim these things is hurting us. Apna DB is the one organization that has come up and to stand up and say, hey, we are Dalit Bahujan, but we do not subscribe to what Equality Labs' claim is, that they stand for the Dalit Bahujan welfare. actually this caste policies are hurting all Hindus. Because like we said, how is a manager going to know who's a Dalit and who's not? And how, if somebody is not hired, that manager is still at risk of being accused of something. So so I just want to point out that having to stand up as a Bahujan, I'm proud to give voice to those who will not stand up. But at the same time, I'm sad I'm having to stand up because it's so irrelevant in our everyday life. So with that, I want to just close out with Sundar giving a few words of advice to Indian community here, students and employees planning to come to the US. How should they prepare, at least with awareness, and to the governor and I want to let you know, we invited Kevin Kish to come and talk to the community. He apparently his calendar is too busy. So
Yeah, no, thank you for giving me that chance. I mean, two things I wanted to say to the Indian community. First of all, look, the truth always wins eventually, and I myself have gone through a fairly tough and emotional period when I've been looking at this and SB 403 and how they've been abusing and misusing the case. But actually, I have a fair sense of equanimity, because what I've realized and what I've told people is I've actually dissociated myself from what the governor does on the bill or what these equality labs and Senator Wahab wants to do. What I've associated myself to is the process with which they do that. And in the end, when you disregard the truth, you always end up in a bad place that will break eventually. So let's get to specifics. What has Senator Wahab done? She's used anecdotes as evidence. She skirted the Constitution. She used a first version of a bill that was facially discriminatory. She did a bunch of other stuff. She now thinks caste is neutral. She doesn't want a community survey. And she attacked her own progressive legislatures who said, let's even do a survey. And then she thumped an argument by authority and said, I have the United Nations definition of caste, blah, blah, blah. Good luck, all power to her, all power to Equality Labs and, the Mr. Karthikeyans of the world. Hey, I'm just looking at you guys. Great. Where have you ended up with at the end of all of this? Let's read your definition of caste. You define caste as something that's an inherited characteristic that is has a restricted ability to alter, right? Has some restrictions on marriage, discrimination, and congregation, right? Roughly a few restrictions. And it's a may, which means, one or more of these characteristics. As Senator Shannon pointed out in the Senate, by that definition, a poor man is a caste. It's you're born with it, difficult to alter, restrictions on marriage, right? By that definition, a Muslim woman is a caste. You're born with it, difficult to alter, can't marry out of the religion that easily. There are a number of things that have become caste under that definition. Senator Wahab knows very well what she has defined is not caste. And if she had read the 2018 UK Community Survey, they would have told her that 5 years back. But those who reject history are condemned to repeat it. The UK government pointed this out. If you take a narrow concept, try to print it as broad, and come up with a broad definition, you end up with something that's no different than a class system, wealth and poverty system. Youth is a caste, if you think about it, difficult to alter, restrictions on marriage. You end up with unintended consequences of the definition. So long story short, you have a vague and overbroad bill. If the governor wants to sign it, that's completely fine. But actually, it would be the worst thing that would happen for people who care about castes. Here's my position on the bill. I just want to put this out. I care, as we all care, about doing the right thing for all people, including Dalits. I don't care about throwing a certain bill quickly and declaring victory. I care about, in the long term, is there something that needs to be done for Dalits if they feel less protected? Is there a definition of caste that perhaps may be meaningful? We're open to that. Is there data that can be looked at that is true, that we can all stand behind a potential bill if it is right? We're open to all possibilities of the truth. But when you rush it, you condemn and you hurt the very people that you pretend you want to protect, and those are the Dalits. And this is the same hurt you create when you fabricate false cases and you play the Pied Piper, then people stop believing when a true case comes about. So go ahead, hurt the people you really should be helping, but what you're doing is not right because it's not true. Good luck to you. The truth will always win eventually.
So thank you for those words, Sundar. So in closing, the way we would look at it from CoHNA's perspective, what can you do to help, to cover yourself, to protect yourself? First things first, you can learn about the issue, really educate yourself as to what is going on, what caste really is, what its true history is. Go to CoHNA.org/decolonize. We have a ton of material that is out there that describes the various historical sequences that led to the current situation in India. We have articles on how that is not exportable or translatable to the United States. So it is really, really important for you to educate yourself on what the issue really is. So that's one. The second thing is, as a practical matter, this is a battle into which we as a community are probably 100 steps behind the other side. In order for us to catch up, the community needs to come together. We need to come together as a group. We need to come together and contribute resources as a group. We need to make it possible. So a lot of people have asked the question, well, how come we don't sue the state of California? Well, it costs $500,000 to sue the state of California. So the second thing you can do is become members of CoHNA, join us, contribute to us, help us fight on behalf of the Hindu community of the United States and Canada. So that's number two. And number three, be proud. Push back, know your rights. Don't let somebody walk all over your civil rights. Don't let somebody say, oh, you are an oppressor because you celebrate Diwali. No, you have rights. In the United States, your rights are protected by the Bill of Rights as well as anybody else. And it doesn't matter if you're not a citizen. This is something I hear all the time. Oh, what will happen if I'm an H-1B? What will happen if I'm a student? It doesn't matter. The US Constitution protects all persons in the United States. So don't be afraid to step up and say, no, this is my culture. This is what I believe. This is what I'm going to be acting on, and do your damnedest against it. Come to us. We will help you. But we need you as much as you need us. We need to work together to identify these issues early, to fight against it in the way in which the American Constitution and the American legislative system allows us to do. And hopefully we can go to a world that Sundar was just describing, where we make decisions based on data and reality and not based on the agendas of Hinduphobic, activist hate organizations. So with those words, I'd like to thank everybody who joined us today. We do have a recording of this presentation available. We will be sharing it more widely. We appreciate your time. Most of all, Sundar, thank you very much. I know it's late where you are. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us and talk about the human side and the human impact of what could happen when a state agency basically went rogue. And it's still rogue, right? So, I hope our listeners our watchers and listeners have benefited from your experience, so they can step back and say, this could happen to me. And what can I do to either stop it? What can I do to help others who may be facing it? And what can I do to educate myself? So with that, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. We really appreciate it. On behalf of CoHNA, on behalf of Sundar, and on behalf of the Hindu community of North America, we thank you for your participation. Namaskar.